Okay, folks, here we go. On to book 12, The Sirens, Scylla, and Charybdis. Now, these are some pretty famous different kind of beings or monsters, and there's an artist's depiction of them being approached by the sirens here, which is pretty neat, and that'll kind of match up with the description that you'll hear in the text. It's going to start off with Odysseus being back at Circe's island, and you might notice that part of the plot of this is Odysseus wandering from place to place and getting advice on where to go and what to do next, and so that kind of continues here. So let's go. So let me zoom in here, of course. So Odysseus and his men return to Scylla's island. While the men sleep, Circe takes Odysseus aside to hear about the underworld from where he has just returned, right, and offer advice. Now, keep in mind, another reminder, Odysseus is still retelling all of his adventures to King Alcinous on the island of Scheria before he finally gets back to that in retelling, and then it moves on in kind of more real time. Okay, so it's still kind of everything in quotes and Odysseus retelling this whole story to all those people. Then said the lady Circe. Okay, so Circe speaks to Odysseus. So those trials are over. Listen with care to this now, and a god will arm your mind. Square in your ship's path are sirens, crying beauty to bewitch men coasting by. Woe to the innocent who hears that sound. He will not see his lady nor his children enjoy, crowding about him home from sea. The sirens will sing his mind away on their sweet meadow lolling. There are bones of dead men rotting in a pile beside the flayed skins shrivel around the spot. Steer wide, keep well to seaward, plug your oarsman's ears with beeswax and knead it soft. None of the rest should hear that song. So she's telling him to plug all his men's ears with beeswax so they're not bewitched by the spell of the song of the sirens. And I should probably mention now that this has become a really famous kind of literary illusion, the sirens, because with that's something that we can refer to anyone or anything that kind of draws you in with some sort of beauty or beautiful song or beautiful voice or something, but it's really a trap. Okay. Circe going on to speak. But if you wish to listen, Odysseus, she knows what a curiosity experiencer kind of guy he is. Let the men tie you in the lugger, hand to foot, back to the mast, lashed to the mast, as you see in this illustration over here. So you may hear those harpies' thrilling voices. Shout as you will, begging to be untied. Your crew must not only twist more line around you and keep their stroke up till the singers fade. What then? One of two courses you may take, and you yourself must weigh them. I shall not plan the whole action for you now, but only tell you of both. Okay, so the plan, once again, is that he's going to get to experience the sirens, right? Because he wants to experience everything. If you haven't noticed that, so she gives him the option of how to do that, and his men won't untie him because their ears will be plugged with wax. Okay, next page. So she's still describing what he's going to encounter. Ahead are beetling rocks and dark blue glancing amphitrite. Surging roars around them. Prowling rocks are drifters. The gods in bliss have named them and named them well. Not even birds can pass them by. A second course lies between headlands, okay, like two kind of pieces of land sticking out toward each other. One is a sharp mountain piercing the sky where storm cloud round the peak, dissolving never, not in the brightest manner, to show heaven's azure there, nor in the fall. No mortal man could scale it, nor so much as land there, not with 20 hands and feet, so sheer are the cliffs as of polished stone. Midway that height, a cavern full of mist opens toward Erebus and evening. Skirting this in the lugger, great Odysseus, your master bowman, shooting from the deck, would come well short of the cave mouth with his shaft. But that is the den of Scylla, where she yaps abominably, a newborn whelp's cry, though she is huge and monstrous. God or man, no one could look on her in joy. Her legs, and there are 12, are like great tentacles, unjointed, and upon her serpent necks are borne 6 heads like nightmares of ferocity, with triple serried rows of fangs and deep gullets of black death. Pretty much the worst thing possible, right? Half her length, she sways her heads in the air, outside of the horrid cleft, hunting the sea around that promontory for dolphins, dogfish, or whatever bigger game thundering amphitrite feeds in thousands. And no ship's company can claim to have passed her without loss and grief. She takes from every ship 1 man for every gullet. If you're bad at math, that equals 6. The opposite point, okay, the other headland, this is still, again, Circe describing all this, right? The opposite point seems more of a tongue of land you'd touch with a good bow shot at the narrows. A great wild fig, a shaggy mass of leaves grows on it, and Charybdis, okay, Scylla, Charybdis lurks below to swallow down the dark sea tide. 3 times from dawn to dusk, she spews it up and sucks it down again 3 times, a whirling maelstrom. So it's a big whirlpool monster. If you've seen the Star Wars movies, and remember Return of the Jedi, I can't remember the name of the monster that they're threatening to throw Luke down, and Boba Fett actually ends up going in that. It's like a desert version kind of copy. It's definitely like an allusion to this monster, but this is in the ocean, different. 3 times from dawn to dusk, she spews it up, sucks it down again 3 times, a whirling maelstrom. If you come upon her then, the god who makes the earth tremble could not save you. Next page. No, hug the cliff of Scylla. Take your ship through on a racing stroke. Better to mourn 6 men than lose them all in the ship too. So that's kind of hard. She's basically telling Odysseus, you're going to lose 6 guys, but do that rather than lose everybody and actually try to make it through. Now, it's hard. It's going to be a hard pill for Odysseus to swallow, I think, right? So her advice ran, but I faced her, saying, okay, now, so this is Odysseus relating himself, speaking back to Circe. Only instruct me, goddess, if you will, how, if possible, can I pass Charybdis or fight off Scylla when she raids my crew? Swiftly, that loveliest of goddesses answered me. Circe speaks up back to him. Must you have battle in your heart forever? The blood of toil of combat. Old contender, will you not yield to the immortal gods? That nightmare cannot die, being eternal evil itself, horror and pain and chaos. There is no fighting her. No power can fight her. Charybdis, right? All that avails is flight. Lose headway there along that rock face while you break out arms, and she'll swoop over you, I fear once more, taking 1 man for every gullet. Put all your backs into it, row on, invoke blind force that bore the scourge of men to keep her from a second strike against you. Then you will coast Thrinacia, the island where Helios's cattle graze, fine herds, we've heard this brought up before, right? And flocks of goodly sheep. The herds and flocks are 7, with 50 beasts in each. No lambs are dropped or calves. These cattle never die. Immortal cattle, of course. Immortal too, their cowherds are. They're shepherds. Phaethusa and Lampetia, sweetly braided nymphs that divine Neaera bore to the overlord of high noon, Helios. These nymphs, their gentle mother, placed upon Thrinacia and the distant land in care of the flocks and cattle for their father. Now give those kine a wide berth. In other words, stay away from the cattle of the Lord God Helios. Keep your thoughts intent upon your course from home, and hard seafaring brings you all to Ithaca. But if you raid the beeves, if you try to take the cattle for food, that of course you want, because they're all starving because they've been out there for weeks, I see destruction for ship and crew. All right, we'll see. Next page. Rough years then lie between you and your homecoming, alone and old, and one survival, all companies lost. Okay, paraphrasing, at dawn, Odysseus and his men continue their journey. Odysseus decides to tell the men only of Circe's warnings about the sirens, whom they will soon encounter. He's fairly sure they can survive this peril if he keeps their spirits up. Suddenly, the wind stops. Dun, dun, dun. So this is now Odysseus, of course, relating his own story, continuing to narrate his own story. The crew were on their feet briskly to furl the sails and stow it. Then, in each place, they poised the smooth oar blades and sent the white foam scudding by. I carved a massive cake of beeswax into bits and rolled them into my hands until they softened. No long task, for a burning heat came down from Helios, lord of high noon. Going forward, I carried wax along the line and laid it thick upon their ears, just like Circe told them, right? They tied me up, plumb amidships, back to the mast, lashed the mast, and took themselves again to rowing. Soon, as we came smartly within hailing distance, 2 sirens, noting our fast ship off their point, made ready, and they sang. Song of the Sirens. The lovely voices in ardor appealed over the water and craved me to listen. And I tried to say, untie me, to the crew, jerking my brows, but they bent steady to the oars because they have their ears plugged up. Then Perimedes got to his feet, and he and Eurylochus, and passed more line about to hold me still. So all rowed on until the silence dropped out of the sea room and the singing dwindled away. So Odysseus got to experience the sirens, but they didn't stop, so they made it through that. My faithful company rested on their oars now, peeling off the wax that I had laid thick on their ears, and then set me free. But scarcely had that island faded in blue air when I saw smoke. We know what's coming next, right? When I saw smoke and white water with sound of waves and tumult. The sound of men heard, and it terrified them. Oars flew from their hands. The blades went knocking wild alongside, so the ship lost way with no oar blades to drive her through the water. Next page. Well, I walked up and down from bow to stern, trying to put heart into them, standing over every oarsman, saying gently, "Friends, have we never been in danger before this? More fearsome is it now than when the Cyclops penned us in his cave? What power he had! Did I not keep my nerve and use my wits to find a way out for us? Now I say, by hook or crook, this peril too shall be something that we remember. Heads up, lads. We must obey the orders as I give them. Get the oar shafts in your hands. Lay back hard on your benches. Hit these breaking seas. Zeus will help us all pull away before we founder. You at the tiller, listen and take in all that I say. The rudders are your duty. Keep her out of the combers and the smoke. Steer for that headland. Watch the drift, or we fetch up in the smother and you drown us." That was all, and it brought them round to action. But as I sent them towards Scylla, I told them nothing, as they could do nothing. They would have dropped their oars again in panic to roll for cover under the decking if I told them what was really going to happen, right? Circe's bidding against arms had slipped my mind, so I tied on my cuirass and took up 2 heavy spears, then made my way along to the foredeck, thinking first to see her from there, the monster of the gray rock, harboring torment for my friends. I strained my eyes upon that cliffside veiled in cloud, but nowhere could I catch sight of her. And all this time, in travail, sobbing, gaining on the current, we rowed into the strait, Scylla to port, and on our starboard the beam Charybdis, dire gorge of the salt sea tide. By heaven, when she vomited, all the sea was like a cauldron seething over intense fire when the mixture suddenly heaved and rise. Next page. The shot spume soared to the landside heights and fell like rain. But when she swallowed the seawater down, we saw the funnel and the maelstrom, heard the rock bellowing all around, and the dark sand raged in the bottom from far below. My men all blanched against her gloom. Our eyes were fixed upon that yawning mouth in fear of being devoured. Then Scylla, the 6-headed monster, made her strike. Whisking 6 of my best men from the ship, I happened to glance aft at ship and oarsmen and caught sight of their arms and legs dangling high overhead. Voices came down to me in anguish, calling my name for the last time. Homeric simile coming up. A man surf casting on a point of rock. This is not really here, right? It's being figurative, making a comparison. A man surf casting on a point of rock for bass or mackerel, whipping his long rod to drop the sinker and the bait for cut, will hold a fish and rip it from the surface to dangle, wriggling through the air. So these were borne aloft in spasms toward the cliff. So I was making a comparison between something fantastical that would be hard for anybody to imagine, and a more everyday activity of a fisherman yanking a fish out of the surf, right? She ate them as they shrieked there in her den, in the dire grapple, reaching still for me, and in deathly pity ran me through at that sight, far the worst I have ever suffered, questing the passes of the strange sea. We rowed on. The rocks were now behind, Charybdis too, and Scylla dropped astern. So he had to row on, right? He couldn't stay and try to defeat the monster. Odysseus tries to persuade his men to bypass Thrinacia, the island of the sea god Helios, but they insist on landing. Driven by hunger, they ignore Odysseus's warning not to feast on the Helios's cattle. This disobedience angers the sun god, who threatens to stop shining if payment is not made for the loss of his cattle. To appease Helios, Zeus sends down a thunderbolt to sink Odysseus's ship. Oh boy, that's the rest of his men. Odysseus alone survives. He eventually drifts to Ogygia, the home of Calypso. Oh, here we go. We come full circle. Who keeps him on her island for 7 years. With this episode, Odysseus ends the telling of his tale to King Alcinous, because it is from from Calypso's island that Odysseus is able to get to King Alcinous on his island. And so we have come full circle. And from here, the story moves on in what we would call real time. Okay, so after that, we just see some questions. We're not doing those. We have our regular study guide questions on one of the slides. I will make sure that is listed on the assignments. And you guys need to finish this 9 honors class. You need to finish this by, by Wednesday night. Yes. Okay. See you soon.